you have always advised startups to keep their customers at a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
They are the reasons we exist. They are the ones who is feeding our employees and us as well. However, that creates certain amount of pressure on us, and sometimes we are not able to deliver to our commitments and promises.
Yeah.
What do you advise we should do when we are not able to keep up to our commitments?
So the very interesting question you've asked me. We've always heard from time immemorial, customer is king, and sometime later I'll share with you when a customer is not king. But I think it's important for us to understand a few things. We exist because of the customer. We are in business because of the customer. And our entire brand is there only because the customer is buying the brand. When I used to talk to a lot of our young men and women who used to join Guardian, I used to always tell them in the first few meetings that in the service sector, you have to do two things every morning when you leave for work. Number one, take off your watch and leave it by your bedside. And number two, remove your ego and hang it on the hook behind your bathroom door. Because there is absolutely no place for either the time or your ego when you're talking to a customer. Irrespective of whether the customer is being unfair, unreasonable, he or she is your customer. And therefore you just have no choice but to accept that.
But then when we face a customer, we have to talk to them. And what are some strict no-nos that we must be cognizant about while dealing with a customer?
So with a customer, familiarity is something which you have to be very, very conscious about. No matter how familiar you are, no matter how close you are to a customer, at your place of work, he or she is your customer. And therefore, your customer expects you to be professional, expects you to maintain a little distance, and expects you to be able to fulfill the requirements they need in their shopping experience.
But sometimes we are not able to keep up with their expectations. They ask for something and maybe we promise them something, but at a later date, we are not able to keep up with that promise.
So, historically, around the world, most customers are very forgiving. But where a customer gets upset, and I'm sure you and I are both customers as well,
Right.
where we get upset as customers is we are not advised in time. So if I have committed to my customer that I will deliver a product on Monday morning by 9 o'clock,
Right.
then it is my job to ensure that my commitment is kept. If for any reason I know that I will not be able to keep the commitment, and if I have the good sense to be able to reach out to the customer and say that I am not in a position to meet my commitment of 9 a.m., please give me time till 9 p.m.
Okay.
More often than not, the customer will accept.
Mhm.
If I just stay silent and don't do anything on the assumption, and a lot of us in our country do this, that we just say that customer will understand, or that we are used to functioning like this,
Right.
then you've got a difficult situation, because then you've got complaints coming up. I know that as a customer, when I ask for something and if the commitment is not being met,
Mhm.
and if then I get a message saying that I'm sorry, we cannot meet your requirements,
Mhm.
then I have no problem in accepting.
Okay. So communication is the key. You
Absolutely.
have to communicate to the customer at the right time.
Correct.
Okay, understood. I, as an entrepreneur, understand this. However, it's not me who is meeting the customer every day. It's my staff. Now, the question is, how do I make them understand that the customer is the key piece in our business, and how do I train them?
Okay. So, how many companies have you seen which have a department called customer service? And there are lots of companies.
Right.
And I always tell these companies that you don't need a department of customer service. It must be a part of your value system. Why do you need another group of people to determine what your company's customer service should be? You can have a help desk, but you cannot have a department for customer service because that has to be imbibed into the value system of your company, into the value system of every single employee. And only then will an employee be able to perform.
Right.
I'll give you some very interesting examples. When you walk into any of the Oberoi hotels, you notice that every employee folds their hands and says namaste. Right? No other hotel does that. Now, this is obviously some individual who decided that saying namaste is an important part of our Indian culture, and it has now become a part of every single Oberoi employee who will say namaste. It's become a part of their so-called professional gene pool. Right?
Okay.
Similarly, you will have so many other examples around the world of successful companies where employees take ownership. And I'll give you an interesting example. I used to struggle a lot in being able to try to convince people of the value of the Guardian brand. And we used to have a newspaper called the Guardian Health Chronicle. We used to have packaging with Guardian. And, employees would misuse the packaging. People would roll up sandwiches in the Guardian Health Chronicle. One day on a rainy day at one of the stores, I walked in and I found there was some point of purchase material, some posters of the Guardian brand, which they had put on the floor, and they'd taken off their shoes, and in order to stay dry, they were standing on top of the poster. Now, which is the company's brand.
Yes.
I looked at the poster. Instead of getting upset, I walked up to the individual at the store and I said, why don't you write down your name? So he thought that he's going to get some kind of a reward. So he took out a white sheet of paper and wrote his name in big block letters. And I picked up the paper and I put it on the floor. And I said, now shall I put my foot on it? He says, no, sir, that is my name. Then I pointed to the poster on which he was standing. And he realized that he was doing exactly the same thing, but this time to his company's name. And that message spread through the 1,300 employees across the country like wildfire on how it was important to be able to respect the name. So when you come to a customer, if you respect your brand, if you respect the organization that you work for, it will come through automatically in your dealings with your customer.
Okay, so customer service has to be a part of the company's culture.
Correct.
Rather than having a training session where you are teaching your employees about customer
Or
service.
try to give it as a pill and say you swallow this pill, and from tomorrow morning you will be empowered with all the customer service values of this company.
We come across a customer, I have come across clients who make unreasonable demands. They are just being a pain. How do you deal with a customer like that when you just can't accept the customer's request? How do you do that?
So remember what I just mentioned, you cannot afford to have your ego, which means that if a customer is being unreasonable, you need to be even more reasonable.
Okay.
You need to cool down. And I'll tell you an interesting story. When I opened my first store, a very smart lady walked in, and in those days, with this first store, first week, I think we were only selling about 7,000 or 8,000 rupees worth of goods in a whole day. And this lady came and she wanted to pick up some shampoos and a few other products, etc. And I was standing in one corner of the store. So I was looking at the whole purchase experience that was going on. She took these goods worth about 3,000 rupees to the counter. And then she told the pharmacist that, now give me a bill for medicines. Now, she was buying FMCG products, but she wanted a bill for medicines. Obviously, she could have claimed that amount.
Right.
Now, the pharmacist had his cash register ringing in front of his eyes, because his daily sale would have been say 6,000 rupees, and he was the single customer for 3,000. So I looked at him, and he seemed to ask, "Can I do that?" And I said no. And he said, "Sorry, madam, we cannot give you a fake bill." She got very upset, and she threatened to say, "I'm going to get your brand closed down, I'm going to get your store closed down, etc." And she walked out. The next day, I was in the store again, and she came in again. And I went to her and said, "Madam, I was here yesterday. We will not give you a fake bill." She says, "No, I don't want a fake bill from you, because you people have the right practices of not giving fake bills. Your medicines must be genuine." And she remained a customer for 15 years.
Wow.
And I don't know how many more people she must have gone and explained her experience to. So remember that a negative customer will spread a lot of negative things about you, but a customer who is negative and who's had a positive experience will become your greatest ambassador.
So you have to stick by your principles no
Correct.
matter what, even
Absolutely.
if someone is being unreasonable.
Correct. So very often in our own Indian style of working, we love to use the word jugaad.
Right.
Books have been written on jugaad. I completely disagree with jugaad
Okay.
because it's using your wits to be able to solve a problem,
Mhm.
and jugaad may help you in the short term, but it's not something that is sustainable.
You asked us to stick by our principles. You asked us to keep our ego at home when we are dealing with customers, and you also asked us to get the customer service as a part of the company's culture rather than a pill that one
Correct.
must give someone and you
Correct.
pop it and you learn all about customer service. What is one thing that you would like to tell startups to do to start improving their customer service from tomorrow? I know it's not a pill, but still there must be some advice from your journey.
So I think there are some processes that we need to follow. The first and most important is to understand our own company's processes.
Mhm.
What can we do right? What we know we are not doing right.
Mhm.
All of us know there are areas that we are absolutely brilliant at, and there we also know what are the areas that we know we have to improve upon. So, first thing is to understand our own strengths and work on our weaknesses. Second is to understand what our customer needs.
Right.
If we understand what the customer needs, and if our people have been trained well enough to be able to appreciate the needs of a customer and to be able to give feedback at the right time, then I think customer service is something which becomes a part of your own company's philosophy.
Okay.
There's a very old story, nothing to do with Guardian, but I read about this. It's about this little young boy who used to sit at one of these major retail chains, and he used to do a lot of good work and so on. And one day the manager noticed that there were 4 other cash counters. Only the 3 of them were empty, and the 4th one, where this young man was sitting, had a long queue. So he went up to the customers and said that, why don't you move to the other 3? So they said no. He said, no, we want to go basically to this one individual. He started observing this individual, and he found that this young boy used to go home every evening and used to write an interesting quote on a small slip of paper. And to every customer, he would hand over one interesting quote.
Wow.
Right? Now, this is not something which he had been taught how to do. This is not something that he was asked to do. But he kept doing it willingly. He did some extra work on his own time, and he was rewarded by a long queue of customers who wanted to be with him. And it's not as if he was making more money.
Oh, okay. So you have to find that one thing that will interest your customer
Yes.
and give them the incentive to keep coming back.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
It has
you.
been a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You podcast. Be sure to visit tbcy.in to join the conversation, access show notes, and discover fantastic bonus content. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Simply search for The Brand Called You. Thank you and see you next week.